Y'all planning for this?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RA Podcast. I am the co-founder, Matthew Jarvis, and with me today for What Works Wednesday is none other than Michael Henley. Michael and I first met, I think, Michael, back in 2021 in Scottsdale after you had been on the Kitsis podcast, episode 102.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly it.
Well, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then I think we're going to jump in and talk about masterminds, which you and I just came back from one a few weeks ago.
Yeah, no, happy to jump in. I'm the CEO and founder of Brandywine Oak Private Wealth. We're basically a $1.5 billion RIA in Cannon Square, Pennsylvania. We were a big team in Merrill Lynch in Wilmington, Delaware. Broke away in 2018 to form our own RIA.
Wow. Yeah,
so it's kind of been other side of the fence, if you will. And it's certainly the grass is greener, hands down. And I would just say that, happy to talk about whatever they talk about, Matt.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second. I know you went into a lot of detail with Kitsis episode 102, but you and I have a lot of friends that are still either in the wire or the BD space. And it seems like one of their biggest fears coming out is compliance. Like, who's going to watch out for compliance? Could you speak a little bit what compliance has been like on the outside, if you will?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So I think there is a big misnomer that I'm going to need to hire a full-time compliance officer, hire someone, new to the firm, new to the practice to cover compliance. That's not been my experience at all. One of our administrative partners at Merrill, we basically kind of 1/3 of her role is kind of covering our chief compliance officer, hat, if you will. And I would say that from our experience, I mean, we were 6 months after launch, and we basically had a full SEC audit very early on. That was a lovely phone call to get, 6 months after launching. I thought it was a joke. It was right before a holiday season in 2018, and we thought it was. Brittany comes in, she goes, "The SEC just called." I said, "No, please." Yeah, is that a funny joke? No. So basically, long story short, not a big deal at all. They kind of went through everything. They gave us a lot of good feedback. No issues at all, of course, but it was just something that was a great learning experience. And I think the thing I would say is that advisors have to remind themselves that you're held to a full fiduciary standard on the RIA side. It's not a suitability standard like you are in the BD world. So it's a much more common sense approach to compliance. Okay, what makes sense? Transparency, of course. But I just think a lot of the minutia that exists in the BD world, in the wirehouse world, is really a function of that platform. I can't tell you enough how many advisors that break away who say, "Oh my gosh, I expected compliance to be much more of a nightmare." It's actually, very eye-opening and much more of a common sense approach.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, advisors forget or they don't understand that inside the BD space, the wire space, right? Compliance is about protecting the BD or the wire from you. It's really not like making sure you're in compliance with the SEC or FINRA. They're just trying to CYA for them. And by the way, they'll throw you under the bus in a heartbeat. But so, Mike, you were saying the SEC came in. You had just after you started, they came in. Did they do a site visit or was it virtual?
Site visits. So they came in person. Yep. So I think it was 4 of them total. So we were trying to give them, Coke Zeros and stuff to drink, whatever they like to drink. No, but they gave a lot of great feedback. It was actually one of these things where, quite frankly, they were very, very just, hey, you're a new firm. We want to give you some honest feedback about, hey, think about this, document this, make sure your investment philosophy is documented in the ADV. A lot of just really honest feedback. For us, it was instrumental. Now, I will say back then, one thing that was helpful was we had a compliance partner that came to the office and kind of spent the time with us, in person as well. So it was nice to have kind of, boots on the ground, if you will, when you're going through that sort of thing.
Yeah, I remember when we first spun up our RIA years ago, we had an SEC visit within the first year. They did it virtually. And all of the stuff, they said, hey, do you guys have, they were asking like we didn't have, do you guys have this correspondence log? But from those of us that came from the BD space, we were already used to doing that. I said, yeah, we do. And they're like, oh, great. And do you have records of your investment record? Yeah, we do. We do these memos. Oh, perfect. So yeah, it was really educational when they came to visit us as well.
Yep, that's great stuff. And that's where I think, quite frankly, a lot of the misconceptions in the wirehouse world, it's worth getting educated. And I can't tell you enough, Matt, how many advisors I speak to that just haven't gone through the education process of, okay, what are the different platforms like IBD versus RIA versus other wirehouse for that matter. So I just think educating yourself every 3 to 5 years is worth doing no matter what platform you're on. I think most will find themselves leaning towards the RIA space if they like the freedom, flexibility, and control. But,
What stuff do you miss from the wire? You were in the wire. I mean, you were born and bred, Merrill, right?
So I basically, So the joke is I should have I almost had a bull tattoo on my back. It's definitely, thank goodness, I had a bull as my wedding cake. But no, I would say, what do I miss? The camaraderie was great. A lot of my kind of good friends are still at Merrill. So I would say the best practice sharing is something you almost have to recreate in the RIA world. You're almost on an island by yourself. Where in the wirehouse world, you're naturally exposed to kind of some of the top teams at the firm. So especially as you kind of get going and growing, et cetera, there's a lot of mentorship that goes on, which is something that I think is that you almost have to be proactive about in the independent space. It can certainly be recreated, but the more you can recreate kind of other like-minded, growth-oriented advisors, I just think it's invaluable. I mean, what I find missed the most, Matt, to answer directly, is being on these trips with other advisors, being at round tables around, hey, what are you doing right now? What are you finding really resonates with clients? How are you talking to clients about tax planning or crypto or whatever it is? What verbiage are you using? And that's where the most of the secret sauce comes from.
Totally. And as I mentioned earlier, you and I were at a mastermind that we did down in Georgia just a few weeks before this recorded. Yeah, and it was the same thing. And we had talks about compliance. We had BD guys saying, all right, what was it like? We had an advisor there that has most of his employees as just virtual contract workers. Cool. How does that work? How are you doing Roth conversions? All of these things. It's a fascinating discussion.
It really is. Yep. I just think the most value you can get from the wirehouse world is that camaraderie, is that best practice sharing. So by all means, when you separate, if you break away, I would just say recreating those masterminds. That is something to me that I never realized how valuable it is. And quite frankly, the format that you and Micah have created to me is what I'm almost addicted to. It's amazing. I look forward to the next one just because it's so energizing. It makes you realize, wait, I love how much you love the business. And when you share with a bunch of other passionate advisors, it just kind of makes you all kind of collectively better.
Yeah, in fact, let's talk about that last one, because that format we've worked on that for a lot of years, right? So we booked a really nice Airbnb in Georgia on the lake with a hot tub. That's always one of our requirements, a hot tub. We spent the first day at a stunt driver racing school, which was a lot of fun with Bobby Orr. What a character that guy is, man! It's brilliant. The next day we had a coach type person like join us virtually, kind of get the discussion going. But then all of the rest of the time, I think every other second was like, what are you doing about this in your practice, and how are you solving this issue?
Yep, exactly. And so much of it, in my experience, is really practicing what we preach to clients. I find very often that the most successful advisors, I was guilty of it for years, and they kind of neglect their own personal finances. Mm-hmm. So especially as I'm kind of coaching younger advisors in their careers, I love to talk to them about personal Roth conversions themselves. If you're early in your career and you're, let's just say, young in terms of income, you're in your 20s, and let's just say you're 22, 24% marginal bracket, if you're probably on the upside, if you're really growing, you're most likely going to be in a top tax bracket in the future. By all means, convert to Roth early in your career, kind of convert to Roth, pay tax in the seed, right? So they can get the harvest later. I just can't tell you enough how many advisors I'll talk to that kind of, as they get going, they don't even think about, wait a second, their own situation.
Yeah, now you're a big advocate, and you practice what you preach. Like, you're not just talking about doing like a $5,000 or $10,000 Roth conversion. You're talking about like convert every dollar that you have, like every IRA, every 401k dollar you have, converted to Roths, because if you're not in a top tax bracket yet, you will be.
Yeah, so I guess I've changed the bull tattoo on my back to a Roth tattoo, a Roth IRA tattoo. But I would say, yeah, no, I do.
Senator Roth, you have a silhouette of Senator Roth.
So I would say that for myself, in March of 20, I converted all my pre-tax dollars to Roth. It was interesting. So Allison, my partner, the brains of the operation, she said, hey, we're telling clients to convert aggressively, markets down 35% off the highs. Don't you have, $500,000 in pre-tax money just sitting there taking tax time bomb, using all my language that I use with clients on me? Shouldn't you be gifting to your brother, sisters, family with warm hands now, Michael, rather than cold hands later? Well, this is what I say to clients. You know what I mean? So I'm when someone uses it back on me, though, it's amazing how you're going to respond. Okay, that makes sense. I should be gifting more. I should be doing more of this, convert to Roth myself. But yeah, I'm certainly a big advocate.
Something we did in this last mastermind that we hadn't done before, this was really one of Micah's ideas. So we'd always done we call it financial undressing, like looking at what are your key practice metrics is. But this time we all brought our full QuickBooks P&L and our personal balance sheets. And I got to admit, I was a little nervous going in. It's like weird to share that stuff. But we're like, all right, it shows here you spent $37,000 on marketing. What's this about? And you paid this in team members. What's that about? And it was, even though our numbers, I think, were all dramatically different, it was so fascinating to go line by line. Why do you do this? Why do I do that?
I think that is absolutely invaluable. It makes you vulnerable, which to me is so critical for growth. And I would just say that from our perspective, you're right. It's difficult to share. Hey, we hired an admin for 6 months, didn't work out. There went $60,000 or something. That was just for nothing. But it's just, I think it's great to share these things because you realize, wait a second, you share a lot of similar frustrations. How do we better implement quality control across the entire practice? So you can constantly say, okay, what's working for you? And what's interesting is you often have aspects of the practice that you may be doing really well. And you can just, hey, if I can just take this idea from you, I've said to you for years, I'd rather copy a genius than rather than invent mediocrity, right? Someone's already figured it out. How do you run a hyper efficient lifestyle practice? By all means, don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Something I noticed when I was going through mine is there's all these stories I told myself about what I knew were weak spots in my practice, but I like made this excuse. And as I started to try to tell you guys, I'm like, I can't speak this excuse out loud to these guys. This is a total BS excuse. And you guys were great to call me like, Jarvis, what do you mean this isn't a big deal, right? This is $100,000 a year right here. Or one of our buddies, he said, oh, I'm not paying that much to my broker. And we're doing the math. Like, dude, you're paying them $600,000 a year, $600K a year. What are they possibly doing that's $600K? So that's, it's hard, man. It's hard, but it makes you stop telling all those crap stories to yourself.
It does. It really, I think it reveals a level of honesty you're not going to have otherwise. And I think quite frankly, I think the right frequency also is worth talking about. So perhaps every 6 months or something like that. I think it can't be something where you're overcommitting. So like once a month is difficult to get everyone together. But I think on the accountability, like quarterly calls, I think that's a great thing to do as a follow-up, just to kind of check in. How's everything going? And based on the environment that we're in, depending on what the latest tax law changes are, what the latest market environment is, there's always something to share with other advisors.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally is. Yeah. In fact, we've got another one scheduled in December. I think we do them 2 or 3 times a year usually. Any thoughts on how to form one? Like you and I kind of met coincidentally, right? I reached out to you after I heard your kids' podcast. We ran into each other in a couple of places and we're just like, hey, let's get together. It sounds like fun.
How to formulate it's a great question. So typically where I have had success is really at conferences, at roundtables with other advisors, kind of talk to one or two. You can tell they get it. They're kind of growth oriented. Depending on where they are in their career. I just ask them, quite frankly, hey, I like to form a mastermind. We'll kind of go somewhere off-site, somewhere centrally located for all of us. Would you be open to that sort of thing? I just always use the word open, not interested, because no one's ever interested in anything. Yeah. Who wants to be closed-minded? No one wants to be closed-minded and behind the curve. But no, and most advisors, I would say they generally say, I'd love to do that. I mean, so whether it's Rockefeller advisors, LPL, and a lot of it, what I find is from the Kitz's podcast, probably similar to you, Matt, is I hear a lot of Merrill advisors that either heard me on Kitz's that are thinking about leaving. So we'll kind of become friends then. And then I kind of coach them through the process of breaking away. And then just after that, they have tons of questions about, what software we're using, holistic, all the stuff,
Yeah, boy, that Kids' podcast might be a great place to even start, right? Because the advisors that have been on that podcast are super transparent, right? They're already in a transparency sharing mindset. So find one that's in a similar, I wouldn't necessarily go to one that's 10 times bigger than you, right? If you're day one of your career, don't call Michael and say, hey, I see you're at $1.5 billion. I want to be there someday. That's not the right call to make. But yeah, the guys at the conferences that are already transparent about what they're doing, totally drawn to that.
I'll use an example. I always accept all phone calls, all emails. I'm happy to get on the phone with any advisor. So this happens like 2 weeks ago. An advisor says, I need some advice, Michael, on which firm to join, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, or UBS. And I said, oh my gosh, you have offers from all three. It's so exciting. I don't have offers for any of them. I'm thinking about applying. I'm like, well, when you get some offers, let me know. I mean, I was almost that's an example to your point, kind of know the audience, right?
Yeah, it was funny. I was actually at CrossFit. We just moved to Las Vegas. I'm trying new CrossFit gyms, and I'm working out of this guy. Anyway, long story short, finds out that he's working at Schwab, and so we're chatting about the industry. And he's like, right away, he's like, "All right, tell me, I make 150 right now at Schwab. What do you think I should be doing?" But that level of transparency, like I'm immediately drawn to that. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't trying to talk about how cool he was. He's just like, "Here's the pros. Here's the con."
Yes.
Same Michael talking to you. Like, here's what's awesome about my practice. Here's where I struggle. How do I fix this?
Absolutely. Yep. The transparency is what's critical.
I love that. So masterminds, we're both big fans of that. Other thoughts, Michael, just as we're sort of talking out of our mastermind, just in general, to share with the audience?
Yeah, I would say masterminds, I think are great. I think attending the right conferences is also something that's critical. I think one of the things that I continue to try to develop and evolve is basically which conferences do I attend, which are worth going to, and which do I have tangible outcomes from? Because I think it kind of in the past, especially when I was at a wirehouse, I would go to so many conferences. Very few actually had actionable takeaways in terms of, hey, what can I implement in my practice? So I just think that being deliberate on the practice, on the conferences you go to, whether it's the AICPA, whether it's, so depending on what your focus is in your practice, just being deliberate from that perspective as well.
Something I've noticed that you do, Michael, when you're sitting in a session, like you basically record on your phone every session that you've gone to. So if there's something you like, you can go back through and not just try to look at your notes.
I'm so glad you brought that up. So basically every single conference I attend, every session, every breakout session I go to, I voice record on the iPhone or iPad, and I upload it all to Dropbox and share it with my partners back home. But it also allows me on the plane ride home to re-listen to. I've listened to some of the Jeff Levine or, some of these sessions over and over and over and over again, to the point where you get much more out of it the fourth and fifth time. Perhaps, one line an advisor said kind of on stage, I'm like, okay, that really resonates. I can really use that in my practice. But I think that is something that I wish more advisors would do. I talk about it a lot because you don't really know how good a speaker is going to be going into it. So that's why it's great to have them all recorded. You can really, take out from that what you find the most powerful.
Yeah, that was something I learned from you. I've started doing as well, right? Because like you said, you get to a session, is it going to be good or not? You get to the end of it, say, that was the best session I ever heard. This guy was a genius. Then like, well, what did he say? I have this like three cryptic notes.
Right.
I want to draw out one thing. I'm not just trying to flatter you, Michael, but where you've built this phenomenal practice, but your level of dedication to learning, right? The fact that you go to all these conferences and sessions and then record the sessions, and the ones that are good, you go back and listen to them again and again. I want to make sure advisors see that, right? There's this idea that like, well, Michael's just a nice guy and he just happened to be in the right place. And maybe there's some piece of that, but you're so dedicated to personal development. This isn't like an afterthought, like, hey, maybe I'll improve myself. You are deep in that all the time.
I think that's a great point to bring up for the audience entirely, is personal development and how important it is. And I always think that I always kind of tell newer advisors, basically outwork the competition, building your practice, right? Number one. But number two, I think the most important thing, be a student of the industry. You should, I mean, to me, especially if it's your passion, I mean, we're just, we're not paid on what we know, we're paid on how well we communicate what we do know. So basically, the better you are as a communicator, the more effective your ideas are. The top advisors in our industry, as we both know, did not go to Harvard and MIT. They didn't go to Ivy Leagues. They're great communicators. They're very personable. I think, to be honest, the more you can stay on top of your game, I think you're delivering more value for clients. And quite frankly, clients come to expect you to know the latest tax laws. They kind of expect you to say, what's the latest going on? We're kind of counting on you for that. So I think advisors, by and large, I think should spend more time on personal development. I think it is a gap.
For sure. Yeah. And you don't need to share numbers of time, but you invest a significant amount of time and money to stay at the top of the game. Like, this is not like an afterthought for you. Like, hey, maybe I'll go to the AICP. I mean, you were very intentional on that stuff.
No. So we're six figures, and we spend six figures a year on personal development, unquestionably, basically conferences, workshops, consultants. I mean, the whole gamut. And it's all worth doing. It is absolutely worth doing.
Yeah, that's got to add up to hundreds of hours a year for you, Michael. This can't be just some small number. This isn't like 1 week a month or 1 week a year, excuse me.
No, yeah, it's like 6 weeks a year, give or take, including masterminds, everything. Yeah. But the masterminds are kind of half fun, half, if it's like a Porsche experience or, stunt driving, I mean, it's almost just having a blast at the same time. So it's kind of a, business pleasure mix, right?
Yeah. I think we're doing a trophy truck racing, by the way, for the next one. So out in the desert. That's going to be a lot
only
of fun.
Makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Well, Michael, this podcast is all about taking action. How about some specific action items that you would give? We've talked about a lot of good ideas. I'd go back and listen to this whole episode, but what are some specific things you recommend advisors start doing right away?
Advisors, I would say number one, obviously Roth conversion strategy is so obvious. Markets on sale. I think reminding clients that when the Nasdaq's 30% off the highs, converting short-term treasuries from your IRA to your Roth, buying the Nasdaq, basically just recovering the losses of 45% tax-free return on the Roth. I mean, you have to be able to kind of compel clients to take action. I think marrying the behavioral finance aspect of it, which everybody wants to scratch an itch when the market is falling. When they see kind of blood in the streets every single day, they want to be doing something. So I think by calling them react or kind of proactively initiating even small micro conversions, 10, 15, 20,000, that may not move long term. It may not make a massive difference, but they're doing something. What they're doing is like buying the entire great companies of America and the world on sale. And that scratches that behavioral itch of, we did something. This is great. Especially if I reach out to the clients on the golf course, wherever they are, I love them being with their friends and colleagues saying, oh, that's my advisor. We're doing an extra 50K conversion. Market's way on sale. Is your advisor calling you to do that? No, they've never looked at my tax return. So it's just a great way to also get introductions to prospective clients.
So you're just, these aren't even like in scheduled surge meetings. You're just calling through your client list like, hey, listen, market's down. We need to do a Roth conversion.
Yeah, so basically, we kind of have plan A, plan B, and plan C for clients. So we end up having kind of three plans. We have the market volatility level. So down 0 to 20, plan A, 20 to 40, 40% plus. Kind of we call plan C the parachute plan. But basically, so what I end up doing is when the market hits these certain levels, our director of investments will let me know. We'll have a list of clients. Allison will say, you have 37 clients. So it was on Juneteenth. It was a holiday, market holiday. I was calling just dozens of clients that day. And that was something where, number one, being kind of the hearing from me directly on out of the blue is something that's very powerful coming from the advisor. Number one. Number two, it's outside of surge meetings, outside of their normal scheduled review. We're calling really only to add value. Let's just talk through, hey, the market's on sale. We can't control it, of course. Our crystal ball is as cloudy as yours is. However, we can convert to Roth your taxes. Your lifetime tax bill is also on sale. If we can harvest paper losses, not lose a dime, harvest paper losses to reduce your long-term capital gains tax liability, and also, reduce your IRA tax liability. It's something that I just think clients, it resonates well. They kind of view the volatility as an opportunist rather than a victim. And it just kind of allows them to feel better about what we are doing for them as their kind of wealth manager, et cetera.
Well, that puts you in such a better position if you're not just trying to defend like, oh, no, we just got to stay the course. We got to stay the course. You're saying, hey, let's take action. Let's not panic out. Let's not move to cash. Let's take action. Let's take advantage of this. This is now like a silver lining, if you will, versus a pure defensive play.
It really is. And I would say that because you're calling them with, I always say you're never going to make a successful advisor, a successful investor, or someone whose primary outlook is very pessimistic. So I'm kind of a perpetual optimist. So I think it's just having that kind of attitude also going into it. Hey, isn't this frustrating? It is for everybody. But guess what? We're calling clients across the practice to reduce their lifetime tax liability. Clients, I mean, they want to hear from you.
That's amazing.
But we're not calling clients to say, stay the course and basically, hey, hang in there and, everything's all good. There's no value there. They can see that on CNBC.
Yeah. And they can see right through that, right? It just feels like you're pandering to them.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, Michael, really appreciate your time today. I appreciate all that you shared. I'm always excited to sit through another mastermind. Any other parting thoughts you want to leave with the audience before we jump?
Nope. Keep up the great work on the podcast. I'm obsessed with it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And to everyone listening, happy planning.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The perfect RIA, the perfect RIA.